What about the rest? Good evening. Can you hear me? Or Barrington talks of loud and clear. So thank you very much. Yeah, I can see responses in the chat. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I can see you are responding. So meaning you can hear me loud and clear. All right. So the voice you are listening to is for a gentleman by the name CPA. My name is CPA Odongo. And we are in this class courtesy of NTC College. So I'll be handling the class the whole semester. And I want to take this opportunity to, on behalf of the college, welcome you to this particular class. And what we'll do is to start with just a bit of introduction and the concept which I want to discuss today is one you have discussed before. And so what I'll do is I will remind ourselves of this contact and then, or rather of this concept. And then in the context of Excel, we'll see how this is dealt with. Now, the concept which I want to tackle today is that of the net present. Is that of the net present value, which we commonly abbreviate as NPV. And this is not new, remember, to all of us. When we talk of the net present value, what do we mean? Let me hear from one, two of you, so that we first remind ourselves, yeah, really of what do we mean by the net present value. So what is this, somebody? So this is a unit which, remember, does not have a lot of theory. You know, Kasneber calls it a practical paper, yeah? Meaning we do not read too much. A lot of discussions are discussions we've had before. And so the procedure in doing this will be very simple. We remind ourselves of the concepts. Then in the context of Excel, yeah? So how do we then proceed about it? So that somebody very briefly, when we talk about the net present value, what do we mean? And you know, just as a reminder, the net present value amongst other criteria is a criteria that we use to evaluate future projects. If you have a future project you want to undertake, and then you have to decide on what is the project viability, the net present value amongst other criteria, remember, are what you can work with. When we talk of NPV and the other criteria also, you know, we'll discuss them as we proceed on. Yeah, you know, like after net present value, we shall be looking at the internal rate of return. Yeah, that is the IRR. So when we talk about the net present value, what do we mean? Somebody. You can talk to me in the chat, or you can feel free to unmute and talk to me. A net present value for a project, what are we referring to? Yes, Lydia?
Kata pesa mangu and transport
Yeah, so I can see somebody has talked to me in the chat, Nungari Sheg, that this is the present value of the future cash flows minus, okay. I don't get these very clearly unless you explain it verbally. But let me just remind that for a project, when I talk about the net present value, you know, we are looking at the present value of the future cash flows, minus from it what we do call the initial investment. That's what we call NPV. So what are the future cash flows? Remember, of this project, what are their present values? Now total that, then minus from it what we do call the initial what? The initial investment. So let me just comment here that for a project, and you'll be taking down a bit of a note for a project, comma, NPV is of course the PV is of course the PV of the future cash flows, Remember, less normally the initial investment. So less normally the initial what? Investment. So that's how we go about determining an NPV. The reason why you may want to compute an NPV, remember, is so that you decide on what is a project's what? Viability. How do you decide based on an NPV? On whether or not a project is what? Viable. So remember that very simply, if the net present value is positive, then you have that the project is what? Viable. Remember, and vice versa. And you know, like I've said, in this unit, we don't have a lot of what notes, yeah? So we don't have a lot of notes. And so the reminders will be very brief before we can proceed to then illustrate now these concepts. So net present value, we have defined that as you take the PV, the present value of the project's future cash flows, can you less the initial investments. Once you have the net present value figure, if that NPV is positive, then you'll have that the project is what? Viable. In the vice versa, where the NPV is a negative, then the project is not what? Is not viable. Now, the next thing to do is to illustrate how in Excel we then compute now this net present what? Value. So what we'll do is to have this example. Just note it down. What we'll do is to have this example so that we note it down. Now, please remember that we are in an online class, yeah? And so muting has become very important. You mute so that you don't disturb the whole class. So the example which I want us to look at is a very simple one, just a starting example. Let's say that assume the following cash flows. Assume the following cash flows about a project X. So about a project X, we'll have two columns, one for the period. You are used to this kind of info, remember, yeah? So this kind of info is not new. And so the other column will have cash flows, which we'll assume are in shillings. The periods will always begin from 0. In period 0, remember, is when you do have what we call the initial investment. The money you invest initially. And so we can assume that this is 10,000. So assume that this is 10,000. And that is normally presented as a negative figure because it's money that you spent, yeah? So that's money you spent, and so that's always a minus. Now we'll then have period 1. And you know, I can assume that the periods are all the way to probably period 5, eh? Let the cash flows for period 1 be 2,000 shillings. For period 2, we can have 3,000 shillings. For period 3, we can have 2,800. For period 4, we can have 5,000 shillings. And then for period 5, we can have 4,200. So let's assume those cash flows for this project towards X. Then lastly, we'll say that our cost of capital for the company is something like 10%. So it's something like 10%. Then what I require we do so that the required is calculate NPV and then advise on the viability, and then advise on the viability of the project. So let's have the question down. I'll give you 2 minutes so that I have it down so that we solve it together. And so as you have the question down, please remember that for this unit, you must have a computer and you must also have Excel in that computer, yeah? Because largely and by the paper is set in Excel, yeah? So largely and by the paper is set in Excel. Actually, up to a total of 80% of the marks in this paper is set in Excel, yeah? So is set in Excel. So as we then look through the course, the whole semester, we will then be working with Excel in each and every class. So what you need to know in detail is Excel, yeah? That is why even today I started with an Excel, really. So you must have a computer, and that computer must have what? Excel. All right, now let's look at this question. The question reads that we assume the below cash flows about project X. We have the periods beginning from period 0. So this will always start from period 0 and then to the other periods. In period 0, the cash flow will be a minus, remember, signaling the initial investment, what you spent initially to start the project. And then from period 1 to period 5, you know, you'll then have the positive what? Cash flows. We are then told that for the company, the cost of our capital, we assume that is 10 what? Now percent. How do we get our net present value? Down here, I'll say that we have solution. Down here, I'll say that we have solution. Down here, I'll say that we have solution. And allow me to just remind that in your manual financial management, you used to calculate the net present value, you know, by first of all, you had to look for what you had been calling the present value interest factors, which you multiplied by these cash flows. You added up, and then from it, you deducted the initial investment. Now that procedure is too long when you're working with Excel. Excel has a way of, in a few clicks, really arriving at what? The present value of course, the net present value, I mean, of course, a project. So what I'll do down here is to say that we have NPV. And how does this work? Now, Excel has formulas. Let me just remind that Excel has formulas. What also in Excel we can call functions. A formula in Excel, you call it a function. So Excel has functions, which are formulas, which based on, you calculate something like this. Now, I'll compute it here. In using a formula or a function in Excel, and please know this from today, that in using a formula or a function in Excel, you start with an equal sign. So start with an equal sign. So you start with an equal sign, and then you'll always type what you want to compute. Like in this case, we want to compute NPV. So type NPV. So you type NPV. You'll follow that with an open bracket. And all formulas, you'll always start them that way. Equal sign. Can you type what you want to compute? Can you have the open bracket? As soon as you open the bracket, Excel is very good because down there, you'll be told what the formula should be. You see, like when you check down here, we are told that start with the rate. The rate is at the discount what? Rate. And the discount rate is at the cost of capital, which we have been told to assume is 10 what? Percent, yeah? So you'll type 10%, and then you'll have a comma. You'll have a comma, yeah? So you'll have a comma. Then we are told we should have value 1, value 2, value 3, and so on. By values, we do mean cash flows. And when we are told that we should start with the value 1, that means we should have the cash flow for period 1. Those values like 1, 2, 3 means periods. So value 1 means cash flow for period 1. So you start with this first positive cash flow. So we need the value 1, value 2, value 3, and so on to the last. So you'll just highlight all these to the last one. So just highlight all that to the last one. And then you'll close the bracket. You'll close the bracket. So you'll close the bracket. Lastly, you'll say that plus. You'll type plus what? Plus now this initial investment. So you'll say plus the initial what? The initial investment plus the initial investment. And then you can press enter. So press enter. When you press enter, our net present value is there for how much? 2424, and then some change. So let's appreciate that very simply. That is how Excel computes a net present value. So normally Excel is very powerful. You don't go through the long procedure that you went through when you did this manually. All you need to know is what is the function for what? For the NPV. So I will repeat. Allow me to zero this. I've said that you start with an equal sign, and you can also do that as I do it again. You can just erase what you have. Then of course we start again, yeah? So you start with an equal sign, and then you type NPV. And then you'll have the open bracket. As soon as you open the bracket down there, you'll be told what the formula should be. That start with the rate. The discount rate is at the cost of our capital, 10%, comma. So you separate characters in a formula using commas, eh? So comma, value 1, value 2, value 3, and so on. Now I've said that values, they mean cash flows, so that value 1 mean cash flow period 1. So I start with this first positive. And then because I need all to the last, then highlight to the last one. Then close the bracket and then say that plus. Then say that plus. Now the initial investment, which is this, yeah, plus now this negative. When you press enter, then we have the same what? The same figure. And could somebody confirm that you are also getting the same figure? Anyone to confirm that you're also getting the same figure? Somebody? Are you also getting the same figure? You can tell me in the chat. You can tell me in the chat, yeah? Just type in the chat that yes. Are you also getting the same figure? Am I alone? Yes. I want to see at least some 2-3 confirmations before we proceed. Thank you very much, Benedict. I can see you are saying yes. Thank you very much, Barrington. Yeah, he's given me a thumbs up, meaning we good. Someone else? One more confirmation? One more confirmation? You know we have to proceed on together, yeah? In case you have a question, always feel free to interrupt Mwalimu and ask the question. So one more confirmation. I've only seen 2 confirmations. Hey guys, one more confirmation, please. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Barasa. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Barasa. Yeah. Now, apart from computing the net present value, you know, the question I also talked about, we advise on what is the project's what? Viability. And so here below, let's have the advice. So here below, can we have the what? The advice. Now, you simply check on the sign of the NPV figure. When this is a positive, we have already said that in that case, the project is what? Viable. So you'll just comment that the project is what? Viable because NPV is what? Positive. Because NPV is what? Positive. And that's it. And that's it, guys, for that question. Is anybody having a question on that example? On that first example, is anybody having a question? Any question? All right. If there's no question, then I'll introduce on concept number 2. And concept number 2 is the internal rate. Let's look at the internal rate of return. If you remember, I mentioned before that NPV is just but one of the criteria that you can use to evaluate a project's what? Viability. There are other criteria. One of them is this internal what? Rate of return. And who can remember what the internal rate of return means? Anyone who can remember what the internal rate of return means? And by the way, as you define this, you define it in terms of the NPV, which we have already what covered. What is the internal rate of return with respect to the NPV? What's an internal rate of return? All right. Just note that this is the discount rate. This is the discount rate. This is the discount rate at which we have that at which NPV is how much? 0. This is the discount rate at which NPV is how much? 0. Please note, ladies and gentlemen, that originally the cost of capital was 10%. Now, for this example, I mean, it was 10%. When we calculated NPV, we got this 24. We got that 24. Now, if I want to make my NPV be 0, if I want to make this be 0, the question I'll be asking here is, what discount rate should I have? That is what the internal rate of return is. The discount rate at which your NPV is how much? 0. Just like NPV, we use the internal rate of return to advise on a project's what? Viability. When is a project viable? Using IRR. And the thing is, yeah, that if the IRR is more than cost of capital, is more than COC. By COC, I mean cost of capital. If the internal rate of return is more than the COC, comma, the project is viable. Remember, and vice versa. Meaning that just like in the case of the net present value, you'll again begin by computing how much is your internal rate of return. You will then compare that internal rate of return with the cost of capital. You can see that, like in this example, for the company, the cost of capital was how much? 10%. So if for project X, you have that the internal rate of return is more than this 10%, then we'll say that project X is what? Viable. Now, what I want us to do is to then compute the internal rate of return. Let me say that for project X, for project X. If we are to use the same example of this project X, what would the internal rate of return for the project be? Let's appreciate that again. We have a formula or a function for it. So we have a formula or a function for it. To then compute it, begin with an equal sign. When working with a function as starting point, that is always the equal what sign, yeah? So begin with an equal sign, then type what you want to compute. We want to compute the IRR. So you'll type IRR, then you'll have the open bracket. Then you'll have the open bracket. So once again, like I said, Excel is very powerful and beautiful. As soon as you have that open bracket, you are told what the formula should be down there. And you can see the formula says that, can you begin with the values? And the values we have said are the cash flows. The values are the cash flows. In this case, we have not been told that you pick value 1, value 2, value 3. It is in general that we pick what values? That means that we pick all the values beginning from the initial one. Beginning from the initial investment, you highlight all the cash flows. So beginning from the initial investment, you highlight all the what? The cash flows. Can you close the bracket? You then close the bracket and do what? And press enter. And press enter. So I'll enter this. I'll enter that. And this gives me how much? 18%. And ladies and gentlemen, what I'll do is to repeat that. So what I've done for the internal rate of return is as simple. I have begun with the equal sign. And then I have typed what I want to compute, the IRR. And then in the brackets, you'll have the open bracket as next. You'll have the open bracket as next. In the bracket, you need to have the values. I'm saying that because now generally you are told that can you have values? There is nothing like value 1, value 2, and so on. You now pick the values in general, beginning with the initial investment. So you pick all from the initial investment, remember, to the last, So close the bracket, and then you can press enter. So as a percentage, as a discount rate for this project X, our internal rate of return, we have 18 what? %. Could I have confirmation again, yeah? That we are also getting 18%? Could I see thumbs up? Could I see the yeses? Are we also getting 18%, guys? Thank you very much, Virginia. Could I see more yeses? Mudeu, are you getting 18%? Thank you, Cynthia. Class, are we also getting 18%? The others? Thank you very much, Simon. Yeah, thank you very much. I can see a lot of confirmations. Thank you very much, Farouk. Thank you very much, Barrington. Yeah, so that is how we compute the internal what? Rate of return. Our rate of return being 18%. Is this project viable or not? You know, that is the next question. And guys, we have said that to advise on the project viability, you then compare this 18 with the cost of capital. You know, for the company, the cost of capital was here 10%, 18 and 10%. The internal rate of return is more. And if that is the case, plus, we can then conclude that the project is what? The project is viable. Is viable because IRR is more than the COC, the cost of capital. So because the internal rate of return is more than the cost of capital. In the vice versa, where the internal rate of return is less, then of course the project is not what? Is not viable. And that is it, class, for the internal what? Rate of return. Now, I want to look at something very interesting still about this internal rate of return, because sometimes exams can be set in a manner that you'll be told that determine, let me title it as how to determine. So how to determine the internal rate of return using a graph. So using a graph. If you are told to alternatively show the internal rate of return on a graph. On a graph, now how do you go about it? How do you go about it? Yeah. Now, this title could also be framed as how to show the internal rate of return using a what? Using a graph. If we are to use a graph, how do you show the internal rate of return? So how to show or determine the internal rate of return, but using a graph. We have seen how to show it using how to compute it using the formula or function. What if alternatively, in Excel, you are required to show the internal rate of return, but then using a chart or a graph. And by the way, always remember that a graph is the same as what? A chart. So a graph is the same as a chart. Always remember that. Now, how do we go about showing the internal rate of return? But then using a graph. Now, this is what you do. And I'm going to look at this using an example, yeah? I'll still use the same example of this project X. Will not change that. And so I'll divide how to do this in terms of steps, so that step number one, 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 so that step number one. Somebody is requesting that we show the question. This gentleman must have just joined us, so he hasn't seen the question which we are doing. Yeah, so Hon, I've seen your name is Hon. Does that mean honorable? Does that mean honorable? So probably the gentleman is an MCA or an MP or a governor. Yeah, so I'm giving you a minute to see the question. So Hon is probably a governor, honorable. That is the question. So what you need are those cash flows, most importantly. Those cash flows are most importantly. Yeah, so those are the cash flows. So those are the cash flows. So 1 minute to go. I hope you are typing them very quickly. Are you done? Honorable. Are you done? So are you done? Yeah, so as we give this gentleman a minute, remember that this paper is practical. And so it's a paper which you not only will be doing because you want to pass exam, but it will also help you at your workplace. By the time we are through with the course, you'll be very good with Excel, yeah? By the time you are through with the course, you'll be very good with Excel. Not only will you pass exams, but you will have improved tenfold on your Excel skills. You will have improved tenfold on your Excel skills. So these are very practical stuff. So we are to teach you so much, not only to pass exams, remember, but to also improve your Excel skills when you go back to where you work. All right. So I wanted to show how to determine the internal rate of return using a graph in terms of steps. And step number one is to determine, yeah? So if you have a question in exam requiring this, step number one is to determine the IRR. Say that using function. If you are to use the function which we have already talked about, how much is your internal rate of what? Return. That is why I said here that this could also be framed as how to show, because you cannot determine the internal rate of return using a graph without first referencing the function. So you must first of all know how to determine the internal rate of return using function before you can come up with a graph, which is the most important thing to then show here. Now, let's repeat calculating this internal what? Rate of return. So we can compute it here and say that this equals what? This equals, again, you type what you want to compute, IRR. So in bracket, again, you need values. And the values are the cash flows. So you'll go back to the question. The cash flows are all these. So you highlight all the cash flows, the negative to the last. And so you'll close the bracket. That is all for the internal rate of return. So you close the bracket and then you press enter. So again, we come back to that 18%. So we already determined this. And by the way, always remember that this 18% may not necessarily be exactly 18%. And actually, I can assure you that this is not 18%. Why? Because Excel is programmed in a manner that it will round off this thing. So what is the exact percentage that we are talking about here? To know the exact percentage, highlight this 18. Then up here, can you see this percentage part? Up here, under this percentage part, can you click on this arrow pointing down? Click on that arrow pointing down. And then you'll come down here and look for this percentage thing. So look for this percentage item. Look for that percentage item. Now just click on it. You know the exact percentage is actually that 17.88. So I've said Excel has a behavior of rounding off these things. Because this is 17 point more than 5, then it's rounded up. We therefore have what? 18. That's what we computed before. Yeah, and guys, you can see the chat. I think the admin is talking to you that you provide your email addresses so that you can be provided with this video after class. I'm just reminding that the admin is saying in the chat that provide your email addresses so that you can receive the video after class. You can just provide that in the chat, yeah? Provide your email addresses so that you receive the video after what? After class, There's somebody with a question in the chat, but I'm not understanding quite clearly what he or she is asking. That repeat how to get the percentage. Virginia, could you unmute and tell me what you mean by which percentage, Virginia? Please feel free to unmute and talk to me. Don't shy. Furthermore, we are not seeing you. Yeah, you can talk to me in Swahili. You can talk in English. If you know my mother tongue, you can also talk to me in Luo. Because I'm Luo, you can also talk to me in Luo. All right, so Virginia, what do you mean by this question, Virginia?
I wanted to know how you the part where you got the 17.88.
Oh, but you know how we got the original 18%, right?
Yes, the 18 I know, the 17.88.
So let me just undo what I have, yeah? So
okay.
Virginia was there initially, yeah? Are we together, Virginia?
Yes.
So you highlight this 18, yeah? The way I've done, okay?
Yes.
Then up here, are you seeing this percentage part? Hapa juu, here.
Okay, yes.
Click this arrow that points down. So you have a lot of options from general, number, currency. Come down here and look for the item percentage. Are you seeing it? Virginia, talk to me until I'm done with you, okay? Virginia, are you seeing the percentage item?
Yes, I can see it.
So click on it. All right. I hope that's okay.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Karibu. All right, so remember, if you have questions, you ask. We have all the time until end of the semester, so there is no hurry. If you have questions, you ask, because at the end of the day, understanding is very key, so that not only do you pass the paper at the end of the semester, but you also what? Know Excel properly. I want you nataka muive Excel, yeah? Nataka muive Excel kabisa. All right, so that is step number 1. So using function, begin by knowing where the internal rate of return stands using the function. Now, step number 2. Yeah, because the chat has so much, I may not be seeing all the questions in the chat. So the easiest way is to unmute and just please interrupt me and ask your questions. Like now I can see you are typing your emails in the chat. Trust me that I'll not be able to see questions. So kindly, if you have a question, unmute, and then please talk to me, yeah? And then please talk to me if you have a question. Unmute and talk to me. All right. Now, step number 2. After you have determined the internal rate of return using the function that way in step number 1. In step number 2, please proceed to formulate. Proceed to formulate a table. Proceed to formulate a table of discount rate now versus NPV. Versus NPV. And class, what I mean by this is very simple. I'll come up with a table where the first column I will have the discount rate. Where the first column I will have the discount rate. In another column, I'll want NPV. So I'll have 2 columns. One for the discount rate, another one for the NPV. So another one for the NPV. Now, the discount rate which I want to work with is a range. I'll choose a range of discount what? Rate. A range. A range means some small number all the way to a large what? A large number. That's what a range means. And to select this range, you need to first of all know where this IRR stands. We now know that the internal rate of return stands at around 18%. Choice of the range will be arbitrary, but the range you choose must include this 18%. Where to start from, nobody wants to know. But the range you choose must include this 17.88 what percent. Now let's do this. Let's start, for example, from 12%. That's the range I'll choose. Increasing by 1 percentage point would mean next I'll have 13%. And then I need a range that will include that 17. So I can go all the way to even, let me go all the way to 21%. So if I start from 12% to 21%, 17.8 is somewhere here. And that 17.8, you know, is our internal rate of return that we computed using the what? Using the function. All right, so those are my discount what? Rates. What I'll do next is to then compute. For each of the rates, I'll compute NPV. For each of the rates, I'll compute what? an NPV, like now at 12%, what is my net present value? Remember, for the project, the cash flows are still these ones. You know, we are still working with this very question. That's our celebrated question. And so these are still the cash flows. If I want the NPV at a discount rate of 12%, you know, I'll come here and say that this equals what? We now know how to compute NPV. You now know the formula. So that equal to NPV. Now this is how I want us to do it. Look here. Listen to this class. I want you to click on this rate so that don't type it. And very shortly, I'll explain why. You can type it fine. You'll get the same answer. But for what I'll do next, when you type it, you'll not be able to do what I want to do next. So it is that discount rate of 12%. Now, comma. Remember, next you need the cash flows from period 1. So we'll come back to the cash flows, which are these ones. From period 1, the 2000. Remember to the last. Remember to the what? To the last. So remember to the last one. Now, close the bracket, then you say plus. Close the bracket, then you say what? Plus. So close the bracket, then you say plus. Now plus the initial investment, this negative, plus that negative, and then you can now press enter. So if you press enter, for the first one, we get 1731. Remember 0.0 what? 06.
Disconnected.
All right, so yeah, so let me hope you have computed that for that first discount rate. Now, in the same manner, we need to compute for the other rates. In the same manner, we need to compute for this other what? This other rate. But now, look here, yeah? If you calculate this one by one, you'll be wasting time. And so, you know, Excel is very powerful. Once you have inserted a formula on this first rate, you can drag the formula to these other ones so that you don't have to compute one by one. You'll be wasting time. Now, for you to drag, we have to do something very important in this formula for the first one. What is this important thing that we must do? The important thing that we must do is I want you guys to remember that because this is the same project, the cash flows remain the same. These cash flows don't change. They remain the same. So irrespective of which percentage here, the cash flows for the project are the same. They don't change. The only thing that will change in the formula for NPV is this discount rate. So the rate will change, but the cash flows, they are the same for the project. Now, when this is the case, for us to be able to drag this formula, then the cash flows, which are the same, we consider them what? Constants. They are constants. When they are constants and we maintain them between the percentages, then to drag the formula in Excel, we must do what we call locking them. We must lock them. So in this formula for the first one, we must lock the cash flows so that they remain constants Remember, even for this other what? Discount rates. How do we lock them? You know, in Excel, a cash flow is represented by a particular what cell. You see, like now, if I come to this initial investment, it is represented by this cell. And when I talk of a cell in Excel, let's assume this cell. Let me just color this. Let me just color this cell. This cell. This cell is represented by what? The cell is normally represented by this letter here. You know, you have columns. You have columns in terms of letters A, B, C, D. All the way, this is K. So this cell is represented by K. And you have rows. The rows are now these ones. If these are columns, these are rows. This is row 42. So the cell is represented by 42, row 42. So the cell is therefore identified as K42, K42. So a cell is normally represented by a letter followed by a number, a letter followed by a what? A number. Now, to lock a cell, when it is a constant in a formula that you want to drag, to lock it, to lock a cell, like now to lock this, you will put the $sign before and after the letter. Please listen to that again. To lock a cell, like now this one, you put the $sign before and after the letter. So you put the $sign before and after the what? The letter. Where do we get the $sign? The $sign is shift number 4. Shift number 4. So I'll put the $sign before K. Like now this one, I will lock as I put the $sign shift number 4, the $sign before K, and again after K, before and after the letter, remember, you put the what? The $sign. That's how you lock a cell. And so for this reason, why am I showing this? I want to lock the cells which are constant in this first formula. So let's go back to the formula for this 1731. To go back to the formula, double click on this. So the formula is that. In this formula, differentiate between what are constants and what are variables. The variable which will keep changing, we have agreed is the discount rate. This one will keep changing. So this first cell, wachana na hii. Mine is D40, so wachana na D40. The other cells, which are these ones, these other ones are the cash flows. So those ones we have said are constants, and so you lock them. Those ones we have said are constants, and so you do what? You lock them. So let's proceed on to lock them. So before the first letter, I'll put the $sign. Again, after the letter, I'll put the $sign. Please leave alone the discount rate. Don't lock the discount rate. This other one also the same thing. I'll put the $sign before the letter, and again I'll put the $sign after the letter. Lastly, this one, I'll have the $sign before the letter, and again the $sign, I'll have it after the what? After the letter. So that way, I have locked the cash flows, which are what? Which are constants. And class, hoping you have done that, I will press enter so that we go back to the figure that we had before. So I'll press enter. It takes us back to the figure that we had before. Why did I do that locking thing? So that I don't have to compute these other NPVs one by one. After you have locked appropriately, you can now drag the formula for this. You highlight it, then you drag the formula from here. I hope you know how to drag. I hope you have basic Excel knowledge. So something like dragging should not be an issue. So you pick it from its cell, you drag that all the way to the last one. Automatically, you'll get the NPVs for these other ones. Why I'm teaching you that locking thing is so that you don't waste time computing these NPVs one by one. Computing one by one would mean you're wasting time. I've said not only do you want to pass exam, But you also have to improve on your Excel what skills. And some things like this, they help you improve on your what? Skills. So that way, we now have the NPV at each of what? Now this discount rates. So that, is anybody having a question on that?
Sorry.
Kindly pardon how to lock. Oh, okay.
It's not safe for me.
No, it's okay. Ijabandara alwinda plus.
So guys, or class, I'm hoping that we now have this table, because this is the table we need, so that as we wanted in this topic, we now show the internal rate of return on a what? On a graph or on a chart. All right. Now, how many have this information ready? And by the way, after class, you'll get my notes, so that if you have missed anything, you'll have this. So after class, you'll have this Excel, yeah? I just don't know whether all of you are part of the WhatsApp group for the class, But after this, you can get this, because it will be sent to the WhatsApp group for the class. Yeah, so remember to join us. Remember to join us, because I want to believe we are the best college, especially on this BDA. We are the best college. Mwalimu is an examiner, actually the chief examiner. And so please, come and learn with the best. We offer the very best. And so please, be part of us. We request you to be part of us. Please remember to also invite your friends, invite your family, invite colleagues, invite your circle, invite everyone, so that you'll be part of our good classes. We report very impressive pass rate, and so ensure that you pass like the rest. So the contact for the college is in the chat. You can get it there. You can pick it. And please talk to the admin. Yeah, talk to the admin. The admin is not me. So I'm just in class to teach. So this message I'm passing. But of course, being my class, I know it's the very best. So please talk to the admin, so that you are part of the group. Yeah, so I can see the admin has put the WhatsApp number for the group in the chat. If you look at the chat, you've been provided with the WhatsApp number, yeah? So kindly use that number to join our WhatsApp group and be part of the class. The classes are costing 6,000 shillings. The classes are costing 6,000 shillings. You can pay on installments or pay in full, like the honorable. We had a honorable somewhere, or pay in full, but you can also pay on installments. So we offer both live classes, and that covers also videos. Yeah, when you miss a class, there is a video for the class. Also, we provide all materials, so don't worry about materials. All that should be sufficient to help you pass exam at the end of the semester. Otherwise, take note of that. And so with that, we continue now. Let's come up with this graph. So once you have this information ready, yeah, now how do you come up with a graph that then shows us what we are calling the internal rate of return? So what we'll do, yeah, highlight this information, highlight it that way. So highlight it that way, highlight it that way. Now, once you have highlighted it that way, up here, I want you to come up here and click on insert. Graphs are normally under insert, yeah? So click on this insert, click on that insert up there, click on insert. So tafuta insert kule juu, click on it. Graphs are normally somewhere in the middle. Excel calls them charts. So I've said a chart is a graph. So charts. Under the charts on the left, I hope you see recommended charts. So click on the recommended charts. Click on the recommended what charts? When you click on the recommended charts, you can see you are taken to options for charts. I will pick this third option. Yeah, allow me to pick the third what? The third option. So I'll pick this third one. So click on it. And then down here you have this okay. Yeah. Down here you have this okay. So click on okay. So when you do that, look at that, ladies and gentlemen, beautiful. Look at that, ladies and gentlemen, beautiful. We now have a graph. So we now have a graph. I normally like the dark design of graphs, yeah, because it's easier to see. You can just leave yours at what you have, yeah, there is no problem. I've only changed the design, so that I now have the dark option. So that's our graph. And this is what we want. If in exams you are to be told, yeah, that determine or show the internal rate of return using a graph, then this is what you need to come up what? To come up with. Now guys, how does this thing show the internal rate of return? Allow me to remind you that this is how we defined the internal rate. That's how we defined the internal rate of return. This is what we say. That the internal rate of return is the discount rate at which your NPV, now that is how much? 0. When you come to this graph, you know what we have plotted here. This line is an NPV line. So what this line shows is the NPV value. So the NPV is reducing from here all the way to here to the negatives. Above this 0 mark, NPV is a plus. Below the 0 mark, NPV is a negative. Of course, as we have in this information here. So we are going to be checking for at what point do we have an NPV of how much? 0. The NPV line is 0 at the point it meets the x-axis. You know, x-axis is where you have this 0 here. So this line is the x-axis. So where it meets the NPV line, which is somewhere here, where I'm pointing using my cursor, that is the point at which you have the internal what? Rate of return. If you point using your cursor, that point, Excel tells you what percentage you have. And the percentage you have, you can see if you are pointing at that point, the percentage you have is around 18%. If that is the case, class, if that is the case, guys, Then with this, we have shown our internal rate of return using our what? Using our. So let's just comment that IRR is the rate at zero NPV. Is the rate at 0 NPV in the above graph. In the above graph, the rate in the above graph, the rate is approximately, you will not be getting the exact percentage, but approximately 18%. So the rate is approximately how much? 18%. The rate is approximately 18%. The rate is approximately 18%. And guys, that is it. If in case you are to be asked to come up with the internal rate of return when you have used a what? A graph. And so guys, how is that? And so guys, how is this class? Yes, how do you find BDA? How do you find BDA? Is it interesting? Yeah, Simon Barasa gives me a thumbs up. Benedict says fantastic. How do you find BDA class? Wonderful. I'm seeing very good responses in the chat. I'm seeing very good responses in the chat. Who some interesting, the love-eyed emoji. Yeah, so guys, remember that this is the kind of training we undertake. Please come to us so that we make you happy. We endeavor to report 100% pass rate. It's my prayer that you join us. You have all the information you need for you to be able to join us. Pick our WhatsApp number and please talk to the admin. Yeah, talk to the admin so that we continue from the next class. Now, please remember that our classes are conducted on Tuesday, every Tuesday, and every Thursday, We make the classes very strict so that in a week we meet for just the 2 sessions, Tuesday and Thursday. The class begins at 8 p.m. all the way to 10 p.m. So please take note of all that, and please be part of our class. As we finish, once again, my name is CPA. My name is CPA Odongo. So when you join us, of course, we will be interacting more and more as we continue, of course, learning through the course until when the semester ends. So we will be stopping there for today, being the very first class. Yes, Muikali, you have been asking this question a number of times. Sorry, let me now answer it. Yes, this is the first class, Muikali. This is the first class. We were waiting for results to be released so that we start. So because they came out yesterday, then of course we can now proceed. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. God bless, good night, and I'm hoping to again see you on Thursday. So asanteni sana na Mungu awabariki.